At our service that we held on Wednesday night, there were so many beautiful, poignant, powerful readings, and I so appreciated the variety of voices that we heard in that service. Today's reading is an excerpt from a letter that the Reverend Jackie Lewis wrote to her congregation on Wednesday morning. Jackie is the pastor of Middle Collegiate Church in Manhattan, and she has taught several classes to Unitarian Universalist ministers. She herself is a United Church of Christ pastor. Here's part of what Jackie said to her congregation. I was in denial. Maybe you were too. Maybe you were thinking, even though we have seen so very much hatred and violence and sadness in this past year, that things were not that bad. Not this bad. But friends, things are off the rail, off the chain. Our people are hurting, and this hurts. Donald J. Trump will be the 45th President of the United States of America. I am shocked. I am sadder than I can describe. My heart is broken. I have been on the phone with so many people in my congregation and in meetings with my staff, and the shared sorrow is devastating. We are grieving. And even as we grieve, we need to be clear. The only thing to heal what is broken in these United States is love. Revolutionary love. We need a love revolution, people, a spiritual revolution. We need to dig deep and think right now, what would love do? What would love say? How would love organize? How would love look for allies? How would love behave toward those who didn't vote like us? We need a love revolution. This is a hot mess time, friends, a time for which love is the only antidote. Now more than ever, love is the only way forward. Friends, my message to you today is simple. Love will see us through. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Love will see us through the shock. Love will see us through the fear. Love will see us through the heartbreak and the anguish. Love will guide us through the hard night. For most of us here today, and I deliberately say most and not all, because within our diverse community, there may be some people who are celebrating the outcome of the election. But for most, the results of the election have hit us like an earthquake. What we thought and hoped and dreamed was solid ground has dissolved beneath our feet. We are reeling from the trauma, and every time I hear the words President-elect Trump, it hits me like an aftershock, and I'm traumatized all over again. The only analog I can come up with is the terrorist attack of 9/11. That's what it feels like to me. Our whole way of life has been attacked and decimated. Bodies are in free fall. Those who survived are left to wonder what horrible thing might come next. Horrible things have already begun to happen. Our worst fears are already being realized. And this is just the reaction of a cisgender hetero-white male. I can't imagine the depth of fear that those on the margins feel. Trans people, gay people, Muslims, immigrants. But I don't have to imagine it because I saw it in the faces of those who came to our caring circle on Wednesday night, and I can see it in your faces today. Your tears are testament to your anguish. I will tell you that it's hard to stand here and claim any credibility. I don't have to worry whether my child is going to be bullied or beaten at school tomorrow. I don't have to worry whether my grandmother or my uncle or my parents will be deported. I don't have to worry that I'll lose my health insurance because I have a heart condition or diabetes. I don't have to worry whether my marriage will be dissolved, declared illegal, and that my partner will die alone in a hospital bed because I couldn't be at their side. I can walk down the street of Trump's America without fear. I can always pass, and I'll always be given a free pass simply because I look like I do. I can hide in plain sight. And so all I can do is stand here and tell you that while I am not you, I am with you. I won't abandon you. I will walk beside you through this nightmare and fight like hell for you because I love you. And every single one of you is worthy of love. Every single one of you is beautiful beyond belief. Every single one of you is precious to me. Every single one of you is entitled to be just who you are and to live into that fully and completely. When I tell you that love will see us through, that love will guide us through the hard night, I see an image of 3 concentric circles. The first circle is ourselves. The second circle holds those around us whom we trust and respect, and those who are like us whom we might not know. And then the third circle contains those who hold a different vision for the world, those whose world was also turned upside down last Tuesday, but they ended up on top. If you'd like to, you can think of these 3 circles as me, as us, and as them. Taking each of these in turn, we begin with ourselves. We begin with loving ourselves by being kind to ourselves. In these days following the election, it's important that we realize that we've suffered a trauma. It's a trauma that's on a par with the sudden death of a loved one in a violent accident. We've taken a punch to the gut that has knocked us to our knees. It's going to take some time to get back on our feet. To love ourselves, we need to name what we're feeling as loss and grief and to treat it as such. We need to recognize that every one of us grieves differently and that we have different needs. Some need to talk and talk and talk to process their feelings, while others need to simply sit in a dark room and wail. I'll tell you that for me, one of the ways I'm loving myself through my grief is to pretty much get off of social media and all the mainstream media. When I heard or saw on Facebook the news that Donald Trump was considering Sarah Palin for the Department of the Interior cabinet post, I said, that is it. I can't deal with this anymore. I can't read about the ways our worst fears are already being realized in what I've seen called Trump's America. So shutting down my Facebook account for a while, turning off the radio in the car, listening to some good music instead is one of the ways that I'm being kind to myself. We all need to love ourselves through our grief by honoring whatever process works for us. We need to give ourselves the time and the space to recover and to heal. While some of us may need to jump into action mode and begin the task of active resistance, others aren't there yet, and that's okay. Whatever you need, give it to yourself. Love yourself through to the other side of your grief and your pain and your fear. The second circle of love is perhaps the easiest of the 3. It's often easier to love others through their trauma than it is to love ourselves through it. And for those of us who don't experience the direct threat of physical or psychic harm from the election's outcome, loving others through their pain can be a healing balm for ourselves. As Unitarian Universalists, we know how to do this second circle of love. We know what it means to offer invitation and hospitality. We know how to engage with and offer support to those whom we recognize as vulnerable and at risk. We know how to bind up the wounds of the broken. But at this time and in the days ahead, our radical, inclusive love is going to be needed by those around us like it's never been needed before. Because it felt like we were getting so close to the realization of our dreams. It felt like it. And yes, we were still a long way off, but we were making progress. Things were moving in the right direction. And now it feels like it's all been stripped from us, or it will be in the days ahead. One of the ways of demonstrating our love for each other, and especially for those who feel most threatened, is emerging through social media. So you can tell I'm not completely disconnected. And that is by wearing a safety pin on your clothing. That's why I'm wearing one today, and there's a bowl of them out in the lobby between the couches if you're interested. The safety pin is a signal to those who are afraid, sometimes afraid for their lives, that you are someone safe to approach and talk to, that you are an ally, that perhaps you might even step in to attempt to de-escalate a hateful situation or even defend someone being attacked for who they are. Wearing a safety pin has its complexities, and it's not for everyone. Perhaps you're not ready to take on that role, and that's okay. Perhaps you're afraid it will make you yourself a target, because it could. And it's okay to be afraid of that. Perhaps you don't know how you would go about de-escalating a potentially violent situation, and that's okay too. But if you choose to, you can add a safety pin to your wardrobe. And by doing so, take on the commitment to love others, especially when they are being subjected to abuse. I'm wearing a safety pin as a symbol of sanctuary, much like our flaming chalice served as a symbol of sanctuary for those fleeing Nazi oppression in World War II. Part of loving each other through the darkness, too, is about organizing and resisting. Remember what Cornel West has told us. Justice is what love looks like in public. Justice is what love looks like in public. Once we've moved through our own grieving and are ready, we've got to engage in active resistance to efforts to turn the clock back to the 1950s. We need to let this new administration know that we will not go quietly into that dark night. At yesterday's annual meeting of the Unitarian Universalist Pennsylvania Legislative Advocacy Network, many of us reconfirmed our commitment to issues of economic justice, GBLT rights, immigration, gun control, and other causes dear to our hearts and spirits. You may not be ready for that yet, and that's okay too, but when your deep sense of loss and powerlessness subsides, opportunities for social action, for loving the hell out of the world, abound. Our voices, our actions, our efforts will be needed like never before. There is no doubt that the third circle of love is going to be the hardest. It always has been. So hard, in fact, that I hesitate to even bring it up because I don't think we're really ready for it today. We're not there yet. I know I'm not there yet. But I've got to speak to it because it is the ultimate spiritual challenge that these times present. And it's the only way that we can possibly begin to build a bridge across the brutal divides in our society. What I'm talking about here is nothing less than loving those who are against us, those who are opposed to the liberal values that we cherish. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus called it loving our enemies. I believe that what we witnessed on Tuesday was an expression of pain on a seismic level. One of the realities that Trump's campaign and the election results have revealed and one that we cannot ignore, is the deep pain and seething anger that nearly half of this country's voters are feeling. Now, there are no doubt Americans who buy into Trump's xenophobic, homophobic, Islamophobic, misogynistic, hateful rhetoric. In the short time since the election, we've already seen actions that confirm that. But I don't believe that those are the majority of his supporters. At least I choose not to believe that. I believe that there are many good people among them, and they're hurting. They feel that their lives, too, are at stake. They, too, are afraid. And for those reasons, they could look past Trump's rhetoric because they were so desperate for someone to fix things for them. So this moment in time challenges us to be our best selves, certainly not our worst. Yes, we are entitled to mourn and grieve for what we've lost, and after the mourning, we must remain communities of resistance. After the mourning, we must strive boldly to seek justice wherever injustice rears its ugly head. After the mourning, we must rededicate ourselves to bending that oh-so-stubborn moral arc of the universe towards justice. And as we do that, we've got to learn to love those who seem to be trying to bend it back the other way. That kind of love is the most radical and the most challenging love of all. It's a love that knows no bounds of race, no bounds of geography, no bounds of wealth or status or education. It's a love that accepts pain as pain and that honors anger as anger. A love that stays at the table amidst chaos. A love that embraces our enemies. Almost 60 years ago to the day, today, in a sermon delivered to the congregation of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King called this kind of love an absolute necessity for the survival of our civilization. Yes, it is love, he said, that will save our world and our civilization, love even for enemies. Our Universalist roots and our first principle tell us that everyone has inherent worth, even those who hate us. And so in the weeks and months, and I'm afraid years to come, we are challenged to reach out into this third circle of love. The how of this kind of love would take several more sermons because it's far from easy. It may be the hardest thing that we can do. But the why of this kind of love is self-evident. I have watched in the run-up to Tuesday how easy it is to be consumed by hate. How hate eats up our energy and leaves us not just divided but despondent. How hate breeds contempt, and contempt breeds fear, and fear breeds violence. It's clear to me that the only life-giving, life-affirming, life-empowering response we can offer to each other is love. To love each other. To love those we see as other. To love even our enemies with a love that binds us together in one sacred family. A love that realizes that we are all in this together, that we're all trying to figure out what this messy and confusing journey we're on is all about. That's the third circle of love. The last time that our congregation's values came under attack, it was a direct assault. It was exactly 10 years ago this month that our rainbow flag was stolen from our sign out by the road. And 3 days after it had disappeared, it was returned, burned, and mutilated in an unmistakable act of violence and hatred. In response to that attack, this community rallied around our LGBT friends, and we rededicated ourselves to our inclusive, embracing vision that no matter whom you love, you are welcome here. 10 years later, we find ourselves having to repeat and reinforce that message and to expand it to include not just those who are gay, lesbian, bi, or trans, but all those who are being attacked and marginalized and who live in fear for their lives under the coming regime. Our doors are open and our arms are open and our hearts are open. Never has our commitment to inclusion been more desperately needed than it is today. At the interfaith service we held shortly after that attack on our rainbow flag, I talked about the power of love in all its forms. And I want to share with you some of the words that I shared that day. What then are we to do in response to this attack on our church, this desecration of a sacred symbol? How do we react when we encounter such a blatant display of hatred from someone in our community? I am reminded of the old children's game of rock, paper, scissors. You remember how that's played, right? Standing toe-to-toe with your opponent on the count of 3, you throw out your hand in one of 3 shapes. Scissors beats paper, rock beats scissor, and paper beats rock. In this game, the rock is symbolized by a fist. The fist is a sign of power. You raise your fist in anger and hatred. The fist is violent. It's an instrument of pain and suffering. A fist, like a rock, can inflict serious wounds. And when rock meets rock, you have nothing but a stalemate, and you repeat the contest. If rock meets any other opponent, you'd think that rock wins out every time. But paper beats rock. Paper beats rock. And how does it do that? It does that by wrapping rock. Paper beats rock because it is soft, because it's flexible. Look at what paper does. It envelops and it overwhelms rock. Love, that soft force, the force that is supple and flexible, the force that holds and envelops, beats hate. Like water, it wears down the rock of hate, bit by bit. It shapes and changes the rock, conforming the rock to its own contours. It's a slow process, for sure. It doesn't overpower, but eventually it overwhelms. Love overcomes hatred and power and violence. It does this through its persistence and its persuasion. The writer Anne Lamott says it best when she says, "This is the most profound spiritual truth I know, that even when we're most sure that love can't conquer all, it seems to anyway." And so I find myself standing here almost 10 years to the day later, reminding myself and reminding us all that paper beats rock, that love overcomes hate, that even when we're most sure that love can't conquer all, it seems to anyway. It starts with loving ourselves through the trauma. It expands into loving those who are like us and those who are at risk. And eventually, it grows into loving the whole world. No exceptions. I believe deep in my soul that someday, well beyond the distant horizon, we will arrive at the world that we dream of. The path to that far-off place is long and treacherous, and we will no doubt lose some along the way. There will be daylight and there will be darkness. There will be days of ease and days of toil. Unknown perils lurk around every corner. Threats that will test our will and our resilience. There is only one way that I know of to get to that place, and that is to travel together. And there is only one guide that I know of on which we can depend, and that is love. This day and every day, I wish you peace, I wish you love.